All right, okay, P. So, welcome to this workshop. For those that are watching it on live stream, just a slight change of processes we work through. So today's session has some slight amendments to it. So during today's session, just want to give an overview from my perspective to management about what we require by way of information going forward. And obviously that's not to be today. And so I'll come to that information shortly so everybody knows. We'll also have an opportunity for the people from leaseholders from Coopers Creek to have their say. And they'll get some questions from my colleagues as that goes through. And I'm also going to ask Tom to give us a brief overview of the management plan that have gone on for the last 20 or 30 years and how some amendments or some gazetting changed the view of those management plans going forward. So bear with me as I do a little bit of an introduction here. So clearly this dispute has been going on for decades. And so what I want management to provide us to the community wellbeing meeting, which is chaired by Darren, in May hopefully, which gives them 2 or 3 months to get the information together, is I want to know the nature of the leases that are currently in place. I want to know the terms that are there, which seem to be in dispute, and I want to know as we go forward and resolve the dispute that we've got, what the range of options we have in front of us. So when I say in front of us, that's not in front of management, it's in front of the council's elected members around this table that will eventually make decisions about how to resolve this dispute. So the sort of information that I've asked Rex and his team to provide, what are the range of options? So at one end, the status quo is an option. So we just continue to have yearly rollovers and the angst that goes with that. At the other end of the spectrum, which is right at the very end of the spectrum, would be to revocate or to change the reserve status of the land and open it up for freehold. And then there are a whole range of options in between. So there could be 10 or 15 options that go between that. So I want to know the range that's available to us. I don't necessarily need to know from management what their preferred options are, just what the range are. I also need to know how we work out the lease value every year and what that's tied to and whether that should change. And so some advice on that would be helpful, and any legal opinions that council is currently sitting on that might restrict our options that are available to do this. Our hope is that by June or July, it will come to full council, which will give us an option to put this issue to bed once and for all. Now that's not to say that it will. And the other issue that I would like some advice on is what happens if a leaseholder agrees to a solution but subsequently wants to go down the track of challenging the decision, the group decision. So do all the leaseholdees need to agree? And if they do agree to, let's just use an example, to a 10-year lease, and then somebody says, well, actually, I want a freehold as well, I want to go down that track. Are they precluded because they've agreed to a 10-year lease from going down that? And I need some advice from senior management about that legal aspect as well, because otherwise a group like the group that we've got at the moment might have different solutions for the same problem. So I want to work our way through that. And I guess for the leaseholders' perspective as well, just want to clarify one thing. One of the issues that I will ask for some advice on is the issue of the master plan for Sandy Point. It's my reading of the Reserve Act. There is no such requirement as a master plan. So, and I'm happy for staff to come back on paper and tell me, oh, I've got it wrong. But certainly my reading of the Act, and I've been through the Act several times now, is that when land is gifted to a authority like a council, or we create some reserve, we have to give the minister a management plan, not a master plan, within 6 months, and then we have to regularly review it thereafter. Now, the words regularly review are very subjective. So you could argue that in some reserves we might review it every 10 years. In other ones, I guess like Queen's Park, you'd regularly review it, might be annually. So want to be quite clear that while there's been some discussion about from the leaseholders, are we falling in the gap between the management plan and the master plan? Just be mindful that the master plan has no legal significance. Now, it might have been developed with the best of intent so that you get a long-term view, and that's great. That's the way we should operate in council. But it has no legal status, and I'm happy for somebody to tell me I've got that wrong, because then it comes back to how often would we do a management plan? And it looks by history that we tend to look at reviewing those management plans on a 10-yearly basis for Sandy Point. So that gives us a bit of a steer on where some of the solutions might go as well. So that's my view of the will. Happy for the people from Cooper's Creek to have some say, but before I do that, I will ask Tom to give us just a brief overview on what he has seen with the group. And once we get the paper back from management, which hopefully will be in May, I think that's a reasonable time frame, Tom will come back out to the group again and say, this is the paper. What do you think about it? What are the options within it? Is anything suitable? If the answer is no, then I guess we're back to status quo, which I don't think anybody's got an interest in. But if there are options there that you can agree on without precluding your legal rights to challenge in other aspects, then that's fine as well. But certainly need to get a resolution. It can't go on the way it's been going on. So, Tom, before the group give their presentation, would you just like to give us a quick overview of those management plans from what you see?
Okay. So, I mean, just to precede that, Chair, Mr. Mayor, sorry, the working group was re-established in May last year. There had been a working group in 2022 to try to develop options for Cooper's Creek, but that had fallen away. Not for want of trying, but it had just fallen away. In 2023, in May, I went down to Cooper's Creek to meet the licence holders, and I don't remember how many were there, but a room full were there, and we had a really good discussion, and we agreed out of that the working party would be re-established and that I would act as chair of that, a neutral chair, and that Parks Department would provide the ICC side one side, and the Cooper's Creek licence holders would attend that, all of them if they wish, but of course it was never all of them. Some of them would attend those meetings. So since then we've had, I suppose, half a dozen meetings. I forget exactly how many, but it'd be about half a dozen meetings. All of them very positive. I think we spent a lot of time discussing the history, and I know, Nobby, you don't want to, go back into the sort of Owen McShane days and go back right through to the, mid-19th century. But Cooper's Creek has been inhabited since records began, and probably long before records began. There's always been people who lived in that area. And one of the really interesting things about the working group was we did spend quite a long time talking about history, and it was very, very interesting, I thought, for me. I read hundreds of pages, if not thousands of pages of stuff that we could find about the history of the place. And I found it really interesting. And I got to say that I certainly gained an understanding about why the licence holders felt to be besieged, and how the relationship with the city had, I would say, broken down. I'd go so far as to say broken down probably 20 years ago, or more than 20 years ago. And the licence holders had felt themselves to be a besieged group ever since. But skipping, 100 years, if not 1,000 years of history, and coming up to, reasonably present day, I think because Cooper's Creek, as it now exists, starting in the 1950s, when Invercargill City or Invercargill Borough issued licences for people to develop cribs there. The Reserve Act, I think, was 1977. Yeah. It was 1977, the Reserve Act. In 1981, when it was still a domain, Invercargill City decided to develop their first management plan with the intention that when that was developed, they would apply for the domain to become a reserve. So the first management plan was kicked off in 1981, and I've seen the original advert for people to submit for that. So 1981. In 1989, so 8 years later, so it was a fairly long submission process. In 1989, the first draft management plan was published. It's an important document. It's draft. It never went any further than draft, but it's an important document for the future. But anyway, so I'll come back to it. 2 years later, in 1991, a final version of that document was published and was approved by council. And I understand, I think at the same meeting, council voted for the domain to become a reserve. So the two things happened at the same time. Management plan approved, and it becoming a reserve happened at the same time. The 1991 management plan was, frankly, a lot kinder to Coopers Creek than the 1989 draft had been, or in fact any subsequent management plan was. So just a couple of very short sections I'll read out just to illustrate that. So the policy with respect to the numbers of people who live, because there was quite a few different groups living in Sandy Point Reserve at that time, or Sandy Point Domain at that time, not only Coopers Creek, Oakey Street, thank you, Oakey Street, and that, you know, that the two settlements there, but also there were other people who lived dotted around the reserve. So the policy was that the current, and this is 1991, the current residential areas at Coopers Creek and Oretti Sands shall be recognised as a non-conforming use within the natural environment zone, but that all other cribs shall be progressively phased out by the year 2015. So that 1991 management plan did not propose to phase out Coopers Creek or Oakey Street, but all of the other ones. It went on to say that the management plan recognises the existing rights use of the two main residential areas, Oakey Street and Coopers Creek. It also recognises that as a non-conforming use. So on the one hand, it recognised, and this is me paraphrasing there, I'm not quoting there. On the one hand, it recognised that it was a non-conforming use under the Reserves Act, but at the same time confirmed that there was existing use rights and did not propose that the Coopers Creek or the Oakey Street group would be, you know, eliminated by some means. The other thing that they did in 1991 was they described the circumstances where buildings could be extended or refurbished. And it's, I'm not going to say you're generous, I'm going to read the whole thing, but for example, it said no extension greater than 30% of the building prior to extension. So there was limits placed on what could be done, but people were allowed to extend or allowed to refurbish and so forth. So if you then go forward 10 years to the next management plan, which was written in 2001, it seemed to use what, remember I mentioned the 1989 draft that had never been approved by council, but there was a 1989 draft, which I think I described as being a bit unkind in the way that it worded with respect to Coopers Creek. So the 2001 one used the 1989 one and pretty much copied and pasted. Right? If you read one, you read the 1989 one, you read the 2001 one, it's a copy and paste. Right? So I think at that point, the Coopers Creek licence holders moved from, frankly, always being a little bit insecure right from the beginning, I think, because they always had 1 year leases or licenses, but moved from being a bit insecure to this feeling of being besieged and being, actually, I'll use the word, betrayed by council. I don't think that's too strong a word, guys, is it? To being betrayed by council. Whether we're right or wrong, I'm just saying how. So the relationship between Coopers Creek in the council, I think from the 2001 one, dramatically got worse. The other thing the 2001 one did was remove the right to refurbish and build extensions and so forth, and greatly limited their ability to do work on their cribs. So if you look at when, and it's a wee bit, if you go back to the gap between 1991 and 2001, there was a lot of investment made, capital investment made by licence holders into the cribs because, you know, they felt that they were reasonably secure and that there'd be no suggestion that they'd be removed. Post 2001, almost none, because clearly, you know, you were living on a year-by-year basis, and the wording of the 2001 one was made it clear that they were non-conforming and that there would be measures taken to finish the occupation. So 2011, another management plan published, pretty much a cut and paste for the 2001. So if you look at the one 1989, you look at one in 2001, you look at one in 2011, copy and paste by and large. The 2011 one a little bit kinder in its wording, a little bit softer in its wording, but nevertheless still made it clear that Coopers Creek were inappropriately located in that, and that measures should be taken to remove it over time, but no time limits set, whereas in the earlier ones there'd been some time limits set. So that's probably a little history lesson I want to give. I know that, you know, the facts don't change anything with respect to the Reserve Act, or the fact that Reserve Act does not support people being there. But I think when you look at the history, you can understand why they feel besieged, and it's impossible to read it without feeling some sympathy for the people who live there, particularly when many of them have lived for decades, and many of them are now well over 65. Yeah. So, cheers.
Yep. Thank you for that. Coopers Creek. Here's your big chance.
Well, it's fantastic to see so many faces around the table, and thank you for the opportunity to speak. Deputy Mayor Campbell, thank you for the history lesson. I'm going to refer you to a presentation that's up on the screen there, and I'm going to just adapt a lot of it on the fly because Mayor Tom has already, Deputy Mayor Tom, beg your pardon, has already covered a lot of it. Liz, if we could go back to the start. We're right at the end there, Liz. Sorry, can we go back to the start?
Yeah, really helpful to talk into the microphone for those that are offline.
I'll practice over time. Now, I beg your pardon, that's some work that Chris has done. That's the one. Thank you very much. So I've never done this in less than 13 minutes, so I'll try and speed up a bit. We had a roading network put into, sorry, bit of context, engaging with the council back in May with Tom and others. The effort there was around wanting to speak to the 2013 management plan, the review of that plan, because it's coming up for renewal, obviously, and perhaps change some of the wording, as it has been a little bit harsh, perhaps you could say. So that's kind of an extension of what I'm doing here today with others, is to hopefully provide a bit of context that has been perhaps missing through the management plan in the past. So I'd like to take you back to how we've got to where we are today as part of the village. There's a whole history that happened before that, but the history of how Coopers Creek exists today starts in the 1940s, and specifically in 1949 when a roading network was put through Sandy Point. The roading network was to extend all the way through for the purpose of recreation. And then very early into the 1950s, we see that there's an effort to establish Coopers Creek by the council. There's clearing of undergrowth, etc. There's surveying of plots, and there's leasing of the same. And per the terms of the 1957 lease, the purpose was for holiday or residential purposes. Further on into the 60s, you get the roading network gets sealed. And Liz, if we could go forward, please. it's in the 70s that things get quite interesting. A few things happen. There's obviously an increasing use of the domain by the public, and that creates an appetite for further sites at Coopers Creek. And so in 1973 and through into 1975, when it actually happens, council votes to survey the land again, extend the sites from 16 to 24. And they add a new condition to the site whereby you must build within 6 months, because there are many out there who were desirous of a site, and so the council wanted to meet the appetite for a site at Coopers Creek. As has been pointed out, the 1977, the Reserves Act comes into law, and at the time Sandy Point is being managed as a reserve, but it is not actually a reserve under the Act at the time. And then Liz, please. I didn't really know where to add this in the slide, so I've just added it up the top there. Something to bear in mind that isn't really talked about very often is in 1989, and I don't know when this started, but the land was residentially zoned, as was the land at Iridia Sands. And then indeed, yes, in 1989, a draft was put forward for public consultation. Following there, the council obviously received a lot of objections to the phasing out intent. They receive submissions from obviously residents, from the Royal Forest and Bird Society, from the Sandy Point Development Association, and indeed from the Aratara Community Board, who all opposed the phasing out of cribs. And so 17 months of consultation follows, and the phasing out policy is completely dropped from the final. And it's at that point that we see there'll be recognition of the settlement at Coopers Creek. Liz, please. Thank you. So to the status in 1992, very much what Councillor Tom was speaking about. In 1992, the Minister has approved the final version, and the final version does have much kinder wording, that a settlement at Coopers Creek will be recognised, and the full sentence, of course, is as a non-conforming use. We could speak for hours about the term non-conforming. It has always been a bone of contention for not just the villagers, for every other group who made a submission to that point. And it should be pointed out that what we've uncovered through this engagement process with council staff and Councillor Tom is that the term non-conforming it's not required by the Reserves Act. It's not defined in the Reserves Act. It doesn't make an appearance in there, but it is a useful tool. At the time in 1990, beg your pardon, when the council was reviewing that policy, they asked the primary author of the draft plan, to respond to some of those objections, and within his response to council, he defined non-conforming simply as a classification tool for when the activity in question does not conform to the philosophy of the management plan. He does not say it doesn't conform to to the Reserves Act. He says specifically doesn't conform to the overall management philosophy of the plan. He does go further on to say within that explanation that if the existing use continues as is, there is no problem. And as has been pointed out, renovations and extensions to building will be allowed, and there was a separate one for 3 years to build on vacant sites. In May of 1991, so this is after the council has voted to approve the final version, but before it's been approved by the Minister, residents, councillors and staff meet again. There is a report of that meeting which was submitted as part of the record at the time, and they said that there was a determination in there that the residents had a legal right to be there, and that some term other than non-conforming would be found for the management plan to describe the status. So that unfortunately has not eventuated in the subsequent management plans. 92 to 2000, the final house is built, which wouldn't normally be allowed for in the Reserves Act, but with the wording that's been approved by the Minister, they were allowed to do so. In 1999, there's the first annual review. And this is kind of a perception thing, but the Reserves Act and the term non-conforming, if you read the wording of the 2000 plan, it appears to be that's the tool that is leveraged to remove the right to renovate, so that no longer exists in 2000. And there is a new policy introduced, which is to gradually phase out the cribs by a process of gradual attrition, which may, as Councillor Thomas has been pointed out, may have come as a copy and paste from the much harsher draft, as opposed to the final approved version, which was influenced by the public. Moving forward, thank you. 2013, there's a second review, so we're on to the third version now, and there's just further erosion of those existing rights and that sense of security that we've had up to that point. You know, through the 1950s, that the resurvey and the extension of the plots and things of the sites, there had been a feeling of security because we understood what the rules were. We had to meet the Building Act and the Health Code and all that sort of stuff. But that slow erosion over time, when the Reserves Act has been in place over the land when it wasn't in the 90s, that's what's led to the erosion. There was an attempt in 2013 to introduce a new policy of not being able to rebuild, but thankfully that was through the submissions process that was removed from the final draft. And there's a continuation of the phasing out policy. Thank you, Liz. The key takeaways here, just to keep it brief, Coopers Creek was established as a settlement by ICC for holiday and residential use. It was expanded to meet further demand throughout the 70s, and the settlement obviously predates the reserve status. From our end, deviation from that 1991 Minister-approved plan and the reserve status has led to that gradual erosion that we talk about of the rights and that sense of security that we've had. Current options available to the council are constrained by the Reserve Act, and yeah, that's been spoken to today. So to bring us up to date into a full loop, as of today, residents have submitted a request to revoke the reserve status over the land, and that would really help the council and residents and the public indeed to move forward and find a solution that's not constrained by the Act. Any questions you have?
Yeah, I'll just have one to start with. When the management plans talk about phasing out, what's your view on the world? So I'll pick on Kerry for argument's sake. If she drops dead tomorrow, or she decides to move to Australia, or she leaves her current premises, is that a phasing out situation? And what happens to the house when we talk about phasing out? Does that mean the house, in your view, should be moved, or should there be some buyout? You
should be able to continue on and sell that asset as anybody else can, as has been demonstrated by 35 years of that policy being enacted so far. Up to this point, you have been able to sell your property to somebody else, and this council has engaged in a new license or a new lease with whoever wanted to take it up. Okay. That should continue.
Sure. Thank you for that. Other questions? No? None? You're free. Did you have somebody else that wanted to speak as well?
Yeah, there is someone else, I believe.
Yep. Excellent.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Welcome back, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Welcome, Kerry and Bob.
Second here. Firstly, we'd like to say that the Coopers Creek residents are thankful for the opportunity to be part of this workshop today. We look forward to receiving the full management report and having the ability to comment on it before any recommendations are made to a full council and any decisions are made regarding us. Coopers Creek has often been described as a micro-village, but it is more like a retirement village, as the average age of residents is well over 65 and most are pensioners. The total number of residents is 26 within 17 dwellings. We would like the village of Coopers Creek recognised as an integral part of the Sandy Point domain. There have been dwellings in this area for approximately 70 years. We want to be considered as part of the community. Given the length of time that we and others have existed in the vicinity, we believe we have existing use and historical rights. In 1992, all of the Sandy Point domain was gazetted as a recreation reserve under the Reserves Act 1977. This then made our village non-conforming within the recreation reserve and why the current management plan requires the residents to be phased out. We have taken advice and come to the conclusion that the best workaround for this situation is to revoke the reserve status on our village area to enable the village to remain and become conforming. Despite the historical significance of the village of Coopers Creek, our existence has not been acknowledged or recognised in the master plan, even though inhabitants have existed in the vicinity at least 20 years before Invercargill was populated. The crib sites at Coopers Creek are well integrated into the surrounding landscape and are not visible from the road. Since the removal of the ranger and his house, there has been a noticeable increase in vandalism and damage over the entire domain. The Coopers Creek residents are now the only ones offering on-site security to the entire area. We consider ourselves kaitiaki, guardians of the land. We have saved lives by putting out fires, reporting fires, rescuing stranded boaties, lost individuals and families. We have also towed vehicles from the estuary beach, thus avoiding environmental damage. We've reported events to the police, some of which have resulted in prosecutions, i.e. stolen vehicles. We are a unique southern community and are similar to the coastal settlements of Maui and Cozy Nook. We request that our community is recognised like others and protected in perpetuity. The only service that is provided by the council to the residents at Coopers Creek is the public road, but it is not for our sole use, and plenty of people access the road to go fishing and floundering, but also for a range of other recreational activities. We are not seeking any further services from council. Why would council require the phasing out of a settlement that has existed in harmony with its surrounding area for over 100 years? It is no burden on council, and the residents act as guardians of the wider reserve. Please ensure our community can remain for another 100 years. At the end of the day, the village would just like some security and equity in their homes, and we would like the support of our elected members to help us achieve that goal. Once again, thank you for the opportunity of speaking today, and are there any questions?
So, Kerry, I've got a couple anyway. The vandalism you refer to, I've seen, is that more significant since the residential ranger has been withdrawn?
Definitely.
Yep. Okay. And the other issue is, I'd like your view on if you agreed to a proposal that comes out of this. Do you feel that reduces your right to take other legal action or not?
Sorry.
So, for argument's sake, if, I don't know, using the example I used before, if the leaseholders were tied to a management plan time frame, if instead of being an annual one, they were a 10-yearly one, for argument's sake, and still had the phase-out clause or not, would that delete your right, in your view, to go down the pathway of trying to freehold?
To have a long-term lease,
Yep.
or even freehold,
Sure.
you still have to revoke the reserve status.
Yep. Okay.
So we thought, like, do one step at a time, and revoking the reserve status would seem the most appropriate step to do. It's still council-owned land at the end of the day,
Yep.
after revoking the reserve status,
Sure.
and then consider our options from there.
Yep. And the last question, I guess, from me is, I've heard you talk before about how the annual leasehold costs are assessed, I guess. You got a view on that?
Certainly have.
Well,
and we'll be doing, we've had another 32% increase, so we will be covering that separately. The submissions close on the 2nd of April, so you will see us back.
but I guess from the purpose of me asking management to give us back a pay, one of the issues I will ask them about is how do we currently assess the annual increases for the cost of the lease
Well, they do it on
or the license, and is there another way that we could be doing it?
Well, in 2020, they introduced an appraisal, a market appraisal per square metre, but they're doing it on freehold tenure. So, and we're licensed to occupy, but it seems to be going up at a higher rate than the Invercargill rates. Like our land in town went up 5,000 between 2020 and 2023, but out where we are, it's doubled since 2020.
Okay.
The per square metre rate has gone from $1.75 to $3.50. and the highest rating house at Oakey Street is 660,000, and they're paying $2,149 per year as rates, and our latest one's 2,450 just for the land.
Okay. Questions, councillors? No? Letting them off free. The ideal chance to have a go. So from here, you heard me say before, hope to get a report back by May, which will cover the range of questions, including what you call the phasing out, or what I refer to as the end of life arrangements. So does that mean, Kerry, if you pass over or you move away, does that lease then stop and we clear the site, or are we able to continue on with it? So that'll be part of the questions that I will ask of senior manager in that report, to see what our options are there.
Yes, we're looking forward to that report.
Oh, and the report will come to you as well.
Yes.
So Tom will come out and do another series of workshops with you, give you a chance to think through. In an ideal world, we get a consensus amongst the group. If we can't, then we need to consider what our options are. I would hope that we get a consensus around a longer term lease, if that's possible, with a formula that allows us to assess, I guess in using your words, a better rental or a rates increase, so that we're not sitting back and arguing about it every year. And then if individuals want to take on the wider issue of freehold / revocating the reserve, good luck with that.
Excellent. Thank you for your time.
Yep. Oh, sorry, Grant.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, thanks. Mayor, just want to understand, is the ultimate goal to freehold the properties? And I respect that I'm asking you this question, but I'm probably interested in what the wider group's view is. Or is the goal to have the right to abode there with not necessarily a freehold right?
Well, there's differing opinions.
Right.
And we put in a freehold application in September 2022, in which case everybody was on board. Some people, then when Tom came out, he said there could be other options. So some people, then because we thought that was the best way to get equity and some security.
Yeah.
And but the ultimate aim for us would be freehold, speaking for myself.
Yeah.
But to do that, you're revoking the reserve status anyway, and right. Then you get other options that open up.
Yeah, I suppose where I'm coming from is I'm trying to understand, because clearly there's a financial benefit if it's freehold, and it brings with it all sorts of other sort of implications, doesn't it?
Yep.
And I see that, but I accept that this is just my view, that, the security to be able to live there freely, if that makes sense, is a different perspective. And that's really important for us as a council to understand what you're trying to achieve, because I think there's two different outcomes, and probably that's what Tom was thinking. There's different outcomes if that's the wishes of, the majority of people, to just be able to live there freely and as they will, but not necessarily have any commercial benefit in terms of freehold title. So I think that's a really important piece that we need to give consideration to, and that's probably something I'd be interested in the group going away and coming back and saying, well, what's the outcome you're really seeking here?
100% of the people are for revoking the reserve status. Yeah. I think there's probably some people that are maybe not in the financial position to go freehold, because you'd have to buy land. Yeah. So remembering they're pensioners. Yeah, that's right. And our houses, because of the licence to occupy, have not risen at the same rate. No. As
that's right. Yeah, well, that's
properties.
Yeah. May I comment actually, Grant, because I've spoken to a lot of the residents.
Yeah.
And as you'd expect, if you've got 17 houses with one or two or three residents in them. They've all got different points of view
Yeah, I
on
know.
that. It'd be a miracle if everybody felt the same way. So I mean, I hoped at the beginning of this that I'd be able to get everybody we all want to do that. It is impossible because people have just got different aspirations. That isn't going to happen. But I mean, what I would say though is that I understand the logic that Kerry's saying about going to revoking the reserve status. I'm not saying I support it, I'm just saying I understand it. Because when you do that, then there's many options. Yeah. So if you because you could still have a license, you could have a longer term lease, you could have free. I mean, it's an enabler. Yeah. So I think residents see, without wanting to put words in their mouth, but I think residents see the revocation as being an enabler for a variety of different solutions to suit a variety of different people. If you're 80 years old and you're not going to want a freehold, right? No, that's right. You just want to be able to live there. If you're, Kerry's age, maybe you want to maximise your capital value, your property. So people have got different, and I think a lot of it depends on what stage they are in their life. But that's the logic I think behind saying let's revoke the reserve status, because then there's not just one option. There might be half a dozen options emerge as a result of that.
Yeah. So it's probably a question to staff then, if I may.
Sure.
Is this the only situation where we face this, or are there other areas where people are? Yeah, I know the two, but other than that, is there any other? Like, would we be creating a precedent if we went down that path? Is what I'm trying to understand.
Of what? Of revoking?
If we revoke, yeah.
Well, again, my reading of the Act, and I'm open to being advised otherwise by senior management, is the Act of revocating a reserve is a very serious issue.
Yeah. And
not done lightly, a very expensive issue. Iwi will come into the play because the minister has to consult. I suspect, and this is just my personal view, they'd be, I'll come to you, Bob, may well be flogging a bit of a dead horse. And that's...
Who would be flogging a dead horse?
The people that apply, I think it would be extremely difficult. Yeah. Now, you can find examples, but I think in today's environment, I can't see the minister being keen on carving off a piece of land to freehold it. I might be wrong. Yeah. It's just my take on it. So the issue then is, what can we do within their current environment to make it much better than it is at the moment?
Can I just say it's not...
Go on.
I mean, I was going to say, however we approach it, whether there's revocation or not, I think there is not going to be one size fits all solution to this. I think there is going to have to be options for people depending on what suits them, what stage they're at in their life, and so forth. And if we can do that, my view, if we can do that irrespective of revocation, then that'll I'm not saying that'll satisfy the residents, but it will go a long way to satisfying it.
But the council, there is a precedence now. The Maui was in the same boat as us, and they changed it to freehold.
Yeah, look, I'm aware there are other examples as well.
And
all I'm signaling is that,
and you don't want to hear this, but you're doing it at the moment with Donovan Park and the other reserves. You're
revoking the reserves.
You're changing the status on that land as well.
Yep.
So I think you can do it if you want to.
Well, two issues here. There are examples, but like any case law example, this is not the call of a court.
No.
It's the call of the minister. Yep. The Act talks about the minister consulting, and so what you'll be doing is you'll be taking the minister on, the minister's decision. So I think that's not an easy path to go down. I might be wrong. Again, it's a very expensive path to go down. And again, if we're talking about people not having the resources due to age and circumstances to buy the land if it was freehold, do they have the money in the kitty for a legal challenge that may not be successful? Look, I'm not trying to turn you away from that.
That could follow the sale of the land when they sell it.
Yeah, look, the other issue you raise is the issue that we are trying to dispose of some land that is currently reserve status because we have no intrinsic need for it as a council, and at this stage some of those parcels of land don't have value for the community, and so we maintain them at a cost where there's no value. So we are going down that track, but I don't think changing the reserve status on some of the small parcels of land that we've got would set a precedent for Cooper's Creek. I might be wrong on that. I'd like to get.
So
rid of
just another note, some of those parcels of land at the moment that you're selling off, we've got a license to occupy at a yearly rate of $1.
Yep.
So
I know.
it's quite good, isn't it?
Look, with everything in this area,
Yeah.
you can find examples, whichever way you go, and all it takes to undo the legal argument that you might have is for conservation to say, "Yep, we did that back 20 years ago, and with hindsight, I wish we hadn't."
Oh, yeah.
And that's where it lands.
The cabbage tree and camping ground were all, have
Sure,
also been
yeah,
made
I'm aware of that.
on the same reserve.
Yep, yep, indeed. So,
Yeah.
I don't want. I'll come back to Alex. I don't want to preempt any of the options that are available to us. It just seems we're bouncing backwards and forwards on issues. So,
Yeah.
put the shoe on with the management. Say, hey, come forward, tell us where our constraints are, what's able to be done under the Act, and let's see if we can find some ground that's okay. Doesn't prevent you going ahead and trying to take the legal challenge of freehold. Alex,
My question's actually already been answered. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
can't hear you. Sorry.
Oh, my question's already been answered. Thank you.
Okay,
Yep.
thank you for that. Any other questions? Thank you for your time, folks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, that's us done then. Rick's already had a long list of the things that we wanted some advice on. We've got a 10-minute break now before
Good afternoon and welcome along to this workshop briefing for Invercargill City Council. We are looking at the Donovan Park Master Plan, and again, to anybody who's joining us on the live stream, it's a reminder that this is a workshop. Council isn't here to make decisions. It's really a briefing on where we're at with the master plan. So we have Cassie and Chris and a presentation, which I'm sure is available for live stream as well, and I'll hand over to you.
Kia ora, thank you, Chair. And so Donovan Master Plan project update that we're here to talk to you about today. So why are we here to talk to you about it today? So in January at the Community Wellbeing Committee, resolution was passed through full council to provide this update to the elected members and also the opportunity to discuss land options or alternative use. So that's why we're here today. That was created in the January Community Wellbeing Committee, and so this is a follow-on from that action. This presentation is a quick summary of what we have to date, the engagement that we've undertaken, the emerging themes and the vision. So I'll just get you to move to the next slide. So what's really important about Donovan Park is that we understand the current use. And so what we have on the screen here is really around the primary uses, whether it's sports field, whether it's currently used as a nursery or community gardens, the arboretum that's there, the stormwater ponds that are there, but also the less known uses like Crafties, the restaurant that occurs within the reserve there. We have large scale events and also the paddocks that are in the orange colour on the screen. What I thought would be also really important to highlight is the connectivity that Donovan Park provides when we think of a north-south green belt throughout the centre of our city. So as we go from Russell Square through the town belt up to Queen's Park, through Boys High and Thompson's Bush, we've got Myris Bush Reserve, and you've got Donovan that leads into Anderson Park. So there's that open space green network that is very important for the city and how we manage our reserves. Thank you, Michael.
And just to recap on the process, we've had the community workshops and public engagement. So that was between the 30th of September and the 15th of December. We went to a wide range of communication methods for that, and we dropped in at New World, the library. We also had a good number of people see us at the farmers market as well. We had agencies and clubs workshop and met with school principals and other community groups as part of that engagement. We've received over 200 feedback forms, and as part of the feedback, we also went through a literature review, which involved a bit of a read through the strategies, policies and literature that relates to Donovan Park. So approximately 60 of those that we went through to sort of get a better understanding of the future impacts with what could happen with Donovan Park development. And now we're at the point where we're having a pause point. We're hearing things, we're hearing things from the community, and we're also been seeing things through the strategies and policies. So now's the time to test those emerging themes that are coming through. Have we missed anything, and what's next moving forward towards finalising that master plan? Next page.
I just wanted to remind people of the detail of Donovan. So one of the things that was covered in the January Community Wellbeing Committee was those emerging themes, to go out and do that pulse check, that pause, to make sure that elected members knew what those emerging themes were. And so currently at the time that we're undertaking right now, the long-term plan public consultation, there's also an important link through to that Donovan emerging themes. But what I described before around the use, here you can see the stormwater ponds, crafties, the sports fields, the recreation opportunities, and those open fields that you can see middle left around the where we have our large scale outdoor events. Thank you.
So those 4 developing themes: connections and access, ecology and natural spaces, tourism and visitor experience, and active recreation. They are now being consulted on the Let's Talk page alongside the long-term plan. They'll close on the 2nd of April as well, and that's where we have some information that sort of fleshes out a bit more around what they could look like based on what we've heard from the public and what we've been reading about. Just to give, as we've been looking through them, we've sort of had some doing a bit of research on what could inspire us for Donovan Park as well. So we just put some pictures in there as to potentially how it could form when you look at connections and access, which is things around the open space connections as well as your active transport. So the routes and connections, as Chris noted, with the heading from the town belt through to Anderson Park, or from the CBD through to Anderson Park via Donovan Park. So we're looking at that, and then when you look at the ecological and natural space side of things, that's like arboretum, which we do have, but you could make that, expand that and make that a lot bigger potentially. So there's things like Otata, which a lot of people were mentioning as a local idea for inspiration. Fruit orchards, the cultivation, the food resilience was coming through. So there's a picture there with your tourism and visitor experience. The Rickett and Bush top one, sort of how could you connect the Crafties restaurant with the rest of, integrate that into the rest of the park. So opening that up, and people could potentially use that as the active transport network as well, biking to the park, stopping there, having something to eat. And then there's also the events side of things. And then with the active recreation, there was mention around creating that community hub, sports fields, so sort of looking at how could that look, as well as nature play, which was a big amount of feedback that came through too. So it's just giving some ideas for inspiration to help with your ideas when you're thinking of that for use, potential use for that space in the future. Yep.
So one thing that's really important to identify here is that this overarching strategy, or master plan, fits within Council's overall strategies. So part of the literature review that Cassie was talking about before is to make sure that this Donovan master plan, this strategy, sits within the wider council strategies and not sitting in isolation. And so when we take those emerging themes and we turn them into 3 vision statements, we're talking here about Donovan of celebrating unique character, rationalising and understanding the land use, and promoting that open space network. And so just to go through those in a little bit more detail, that celebrating unique character is really important here at Donovan. There's an opportunity to enhance the landscape to continue the rural feel. There's also the blue-green network that we have in this space around stormwater and 3 water management. And so in the development of these, we've been well connected with our 3 waters teams. What are their pressure points? What are their wants and needs when we think about our growing city? And how can Donovan assist in that with 3 water management, stormwater management, but also provide that unique natural character while providing that recreation opportunity. I'll talk about rationalising land use because I think there's not a full understanding of how this space is used. And I think what's really important is that we understand the options for this land, because at the moment, if we remember the first slide, those large-scale events and the paddocks, a lot of them are behind fences. And so what we are proposing with regards to this overarching strategy is opening a couple of those gates, making sure that access to this park is for the people, and so that we can actually better utilise the land that we have. It's also about tagging specifically the management of these parcels of land, so that, look, if we want large-scale events to come to Invercargill in a central, high-priority location within the city, we're managing that space so that we're attractive to those large-scale events. We've had young farmers in the past, we have the AMP show, and we have equestrian here, but in the last 12 months we've also had the connections, the power net come down and utilise the space. And so we're really keen to understand if we can promote the use of that for those large-scale events. But it's really important that we're targeted so that we're managing it like that. At the moment, behind locked gates, it's currently being used as a farm until such time as there's large scale events. And then we flip it over and we use it for large scale events. So really want to make sure that we are using and opening up this land as much as we can for the people. We've heard quite a lot from our engagement that people want this to be a family focused area. At the moment, people who use this park know about this park, but they use it for a specific purpose. What this strategy is pointing out is trying to elongate the stay, making sure that it's a place for our whānau to be for a long period of time, while also providing those recreation, walking and cycling activities. I want to repeat that open space network that's really important for our city and that north-south orientation. So promoting that open space and being aware of how it's connected across the city is also really important. But actually opening up that space is also really important. So we want more of the park to be accessible for people. We want to link that ecology and the recreation corridors so that people can really understand how this space is an asset. We heard quite a lot that it's a local hub. It's an important park for the people of North Invercargill. And so we heard that quite a lot. We've been upfront with people around different land use options when we've been standing at those places that Cassie's talked about before. And there's been really open and robust dialogue with all members of the public that have come to have a chat with us. I've been really impressed with the public about how engaged they are with this public consultation period. People have a view and they let us know their view, and it's informed this. And so I might just leave it there because the rest of it's on the screen, but really keen for you guys to get an update of how the master plan is developing, where we are for the vision and the strategy, and as the resolution outlined, provide that discussion opportunity for alternative land use. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillors, open for questions. Trish.
I'm interested as to why you need another place for events. The city owns Rugby Park area. We own, we've got Anderson's Park.
Can you use the microphone, Trish, please?
Sorry. Why would we establish another area that isn't already established as an events area that is for the North Invercargill people? It doesn't seem to me in the best interest of our whole community. Just my thoughts. Have you got any response to that? Or?
So the current space is used for outdoor events. So we're looking at understanding that use and trying to bring more large-scale events into Invercargill through the use of this space.
But my question is, sorry, excuse me.
I don't know if I answered you.
No, my question is really, why would we develop another place for large-scale events when there are other ones already in the city?
And so, apologies if I didn't answer your question. We're not developing another space. This is a space that's already used for large-scale events.
Yeah.
And we've heard from our community that that's really important to them. And through our literature review, we've also identified that this is a space. So we're not developing a new place.
No, but you're opening it up and it will be purposeful for that purpose. Did you, I presume you did you consult with a large number of people from South City?
Absolutely. We engaged across all of Invercargill.
Yeah.
And so some of those online submissions were not just in North Invercargill.
Yeah.
And so often the farmers market and those type of locations, we were talking to people from, they're not necessarily from North Invercargill, they're across the city.
Thank you.
I've got Grant, then Evelyn, Tom and Nobby. So Grant.
Yeah, could you just go back to the map that you showed of the city? Yeah, no, that previous one, thanks. Yeah, so I'm interested in, there's parks south of Queen's Park.
It's like Russell Square and Town
Yeah.
Belt that I talked to. Yep.
Why are they not included on that? If we're talking about an overall green belt
To fit it on the
space for our
presentation.
cities,
Yeah.
shouldn't they be included on that? And
So-
equally the ones further to the east?
You're right. And then the draft master plan, it does outline those spaces. We're trying to get it on a presentation. So those parks that I talked to are represented within the master plan.
Okay.
That image has been snipped for this presentation.
And then secondly, I'm interested in what you consider a large-scale event, and also what interest you've had from outside of the city of types of large-scale events that would come to the city to use this space.
So I talked briefly about the Power Net Connections event that happened within the last 12 months.
Yeah.
And so that's a new event for this space, and the overall feedback that we got.
It's a new event for the space or the city? It hasn't
Both.
happened in the city previously.
Negative. Yep. So we're having the space available for large scale events brings in benefits that's wider than just Parks and Rec.
Okay,
So I don't need to.
So what are you classifying as a large scale event? How many people were involved in the PowerNet event?
I don't know if I have a specific answer to that question.
Maybe I can help. A large-scale event in this instance would be the likes of the AMP show, which has a large number of people coming in, or some of the equestrian events that utilise a large land space.
Right, yeah, because I think that's important to understand, because what I've taken from what you've said is that there's other events that would come to Invercargill if we develop this area. And, I think we need to understand that, because at the moment it seems to be just a bit of a hollow sort of a promise. I'm certainly not aware of any agricultural events that would come to the city and use this sort of space that wouldn't be used somewhere else. But there may be other events, I'm not sure, but I think that would need to be quantified.
Evelyn.
Oh, kia ora. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So within the other map, which showed the various uses, the one just a little bit further. Yeah, that one. So cultivation, I take it, is the nursery. You've got 2 parts for water and nature. Now, I'm assuming, despite the lovely photos, that we're not just talking ducks. That there is more to what is available within that water and nature space. So, have we got some information coming to us about what that is? Because I'm looking at the different things that you have put up in the north-south axis. They all have different characters. Queen's Park is very cultivated and European. Thompson's Bush is very native bush and not all that well cared for. But you get to Anderson's Park, which again is a wide open space with a house as a feature, as opposed to cultivation and all those sorts of things. So they've all got different characters. What are you telling us is the character around the water and nature, and what makes this different than the other parks that we have in our conversation?
Thank you for your question, and I'll respond to saying that firstly, when you're talking about the cultivation and the nursery in the top right-hand corner, this overall vision and strategy and what we've heard from the people of Invercargill, and when we've done our literature review, is actually food security and resilience here is also really important. And so that cultivation purple bubble that you can see at the top, that's an expansion of the current cultivation that's at site. So I just wanted to be clear, that's not illustrating
helpful.
what's there now, that's our vision for the future. When we talk about our water and nature space, this is what I mean with our literature review and talking to our 3 waters colleagues around stormwater management, around making sure that we have the right infrastructure to support the growing city that we have. And if I think of other places around New Zealand, like Travis Wetlands in Christchurch is a good example of how we can use something that the city requires for its infrastructure, and we can also use it for a recreation opportunity. And so that's come through our literature review around the demands and the infrastructure requirements for this space.
So as a supplementary to that, in the water and nature areas as they exist at the moment, are there things like indigenous species? It's not just purely a pond that duck, a water area that ducks are in. Has it been investigated for tuna and galaxids and things like that?
Yes, I'll say that the primary reason for this is stormwater management, and our native species are amazing at getting everywhere. So do you have a response to that, Cass, around the latest site thing of that site?
Yes, so they did some high-level testing as such on the stormwater pond, and while the raft was going through the water, there were about 15 to 30 tuna that came up to say hello. So yeah, there's quite a number in there. The water quality came back as sort of borderline swimmable. You just wouldn't want to put your head under right now. And there's not really much from, as you wouldn't really expect anyway, there's nothing really coming in from fertilisers or anything like that, but it's more the duck and geese species that were more on the top of the water. So yeah, but I think we'd still be looking at options. There could be different uses for that space. Yeah.
No, thank you, that's helpful. And I do want to thank you for clarifying the cultivation as also looking at the food security situation, because I know that that's a very big conversation at the moment. Thank you.
Thank you. Next on the conversation conveyor belt, Tom, Nobby, Rear, Berry, Grant. Tom.
Thank you. So prior to getting into this work looking at the master plan, isn't it? It's a master plan.
Correct.
So prior to getting into this, if somebody had asked me to describe Donovan Park, and I go to Donovan Park all the time with my dogs, then I would have described the walk through with the ponds and the ducks and other stuff in the day, but basically the ponds and the ducks, and you walk through there and there's quite a lot, actually there's paddocks on either side that are no use for anything at the moment as far as I know. But you walk through there and there's trees, and then at the other side there's the rugby parks and so forth. That was my perception of Donovan Park, if somebody had asked me. And I guess, you know, if I'd been pushed, I would probably have described the area that's used for the E&P, because, you know, that's something that we recognise as being used. But no matter how hard people push me, I would never have described the farm, because I never knew that the farm was part of Donovan Park, if I'm honest. I don't know what I thought. I just never thought about it at all. And I think I've described it in a previous meeting as sort of terra incognita as far as the city's concerned. Nobody knows it's there. Nobody's ever been in it. Nobody could tell you what was behind the hedge. That'd be my perception of the stuff that's it's gone. But the stuff that's behind the pub, nobody would know it was there. So my question, coming to your question, is to what extent did you find when you went out and talked to people, to what extent did they understand the extent of Donovan Park? Because it's 60 odd hectares, isn't it?
79.
79 hectares. Were people able to think about the 79 hectares, or did they more think about it in terms of the park, the rugby parks, maybe a push where the horses are and so forth, but then not think at all about? So, you know, how do people think? What do people think the area of Donovan Park is?
So I'm going to describe this as we compare it to the other master plan that we're going through and getting feedback on, the Sandy Point domain. So everyone knew about Sandy Point. People had various levels of passion towards Sandy Point, but everyone knew about it. When we're talking about Donovan Park, you either knew about it and you were passionate and you had a voice and you knew about the extent of it, but there were probably, I'm going to estimate, 10 or 15% of people that we were talking to that went, oh, isn't that the road to Anderson?
Sorry, so 85% of people knew about the farm and the...
They absolutely were really passionate about it, but there was a significant percentage of people that just thought it was the road to Anderson Park. So they didn't have that connectivity to it.
I would have been in the 15% now, I must admit.
Right?
Just to add to that, Councillor Campbell, we also had big plans made up so that when people came to the market or New World, we actually had the big maps that outlined the different uses, the activities, and those sort of pictures as well, so people could actually get an idea of what was there to help explain how you would describe it. Yeah.
Nobby.
Thank you, Chair. So I just want to go back 18 months or so ago when Parks presented a report to this council that basically said several things, and I'll just work my way through those. One, that Invercargill City Council has a per capita green space probably higher than any other city of comparable size in the country, and also said that we had, I think, 74 parks by recollection, and they presented a list of 16 that they felt were surplus to needs. that was surplus to needs of the city. And so I struggle now to understand why the same Parks Division comes forward about 12 months and says this is a critical piece of real estate that we need to develop because we've now got some consultation on it. The biggest need that we've had in the city for the last 20 or 30 years has been around elderly housing. It's the biggest thing that we face. And I just think that we are artificially generating a need for this farm when in fact we should consider selling it. And in this process, I don't think we've uttered that. There's been some discussion, I've had some discussion with management that we shouldn't be suggesting that we want to potentially sell it so that we can use the funds, be it the funds for parks and reserves or be it the funds for directly for elderly housing, but either way, funds that we need by way of revenue. Because this is an important source of revenue, having land that you don't need that you dispose of, otherwise you've got to manage it. And so I'm really struggling. I mean, nobody wants to get rid of lands, and if we want to dispose of lands, I guess as a council, the last division that we would have for disposing of land should be the parks, because Parks Division by nature want to hang on to parks and develop them. That's their core business. And so I'm struggling that with the public consultation we did, that we didn't suggest to the community that we may look to dispose of the farm, not Donovan Park. And I think the messaging's not been good, because I've had quite a bit of feedback to say, why are you getting rid of Donovan Park? So we're not suggesting to get rid of it. We're suggesting that a parcel of the land, 37 hectares, could be surplus to our needs. Now everybody says, well, the A&P show go there. Well, A&P show could go to down to Ascot Park, as the equestrian could do as well. And we've got land there that I'm sure that we could encourage the owners of Ascot Park to incorporate those big events that you refer to, because they've got grandstands and everything go with it. So I guess I'm struggling with the fact that I think that we've built up a desire to develop the land without giving the community the option to consider selling it, because and I know that people will say I'm predetermination here, but I still have a desire to sell it. That's personally me. And so when I do that, it's going to be a little bit farcical that nobody's mentioned that to the community by way of consultation. So I just wonder why we didn't do that.
So I'll interject there
Sure.
first. Having taken part in quite a few of those consultation briefings, it was discussed. It was absolutely raised, and there were people who were coming forward and asking about it, because there's been obvious discussion in the community.
Okay.
So it absolutely did form a part of the discussions, and in fact, right to a fortnight ago when we were doing LTP consultation at Donovan Park, people were asking about it.
Okay.
And an example of some of the consultation then was, they could see some rationale around disposing of some of the land for residential or elderly housing, but there was a desire to protect that natural strip up through the middle. So that's okay. It has been happening.
Okay, thank you for that.
Ria.
Thank you. I'm quite interested in some of the feedback that you received. You said here that 10 to 15% of the people reiterated to you that they didn't realise that there was more than the road to Anderson's Park. Out of the 85% of those other sides of people, what were their feelings about disposing of areas of land there?
Thank you. We were upfront about alternative land use here. It was part of our Let's Talk page. It was very passionate from the people that knew about the place. Mm-hmm. And we were very clear when people came to talk to us what section of Donovan Park was referenced. Not talking about the Waikiwi rugby fields, not talking about the cultivation, not talking about the road, the strip in the middle. It was really that's 37 hectares. Mm-hmm. So as Cassie has described, when we were talking to people, we had maps in front of us describing what Donovan Park was. And so there was automatically a knowledge transfer when they came to talk to us, because they could see a map of what it was fully. I can't answer your question around if we didn't have that map, what would people think? Mm-hmm. Because when people came up to talk to us, they automatically had an understanding of the entire breadth of it.
that was my follow-up would be, so they knew visually from the graphs that you provided exactly what area was relative to what you're there for. Just, Tom, for you, when you have children playing rugby, you pretty much know about the rugby park there beside the park and using all the facilities around that area. The groins in Christchurch pre-earthquake, are you familiar with that place?
Yes.
So when I'm looking at the other graph that's got the more greener, oh yeah, that one there too. I mean, that place is really pre-earthquake, was well resourced, well used for the areas that you've got up there. Riccarton Bush Christchurch is a fairly huge, substantial market. We asked the question, one of the councillors asked the questions of why would we now consider it here? What about other areas? Was there anyone of the public asking why are we keeping Rugby Park? Why don't we get rid of that and keep Donovan Park?
No.
Okay, no abnormalities like that? Okay, thank you.
Wasn't part of the conversation, to be fair.
Was it the AMP show?
Yeah. Barry.
Yeah, has there been any look into the security of around Donovan Park and some of their parks? Like I've been talking to police in the last few days, and the youth crime in Invercargill has skyrocketed. It's going really out through the roof. Have we ever looked at that in our park situations? I know this is only about Donovan Park, but it's only another park.
Yeah, so as part of our planning and design and part of that whole journey, the process of development is looking into security and the design of the spaces in terms of like putting vegetation in the right places so that you can actually see through the park as opposed to being hidden behind buildings and stuff like that. So that's what we're looking at with Donovan Park and any other parks that we're looking at renewing or developing. Yeah,
There's just another thing. When I walk through Donovan Park lately, especially after a lot of rain, it's pretty boggy when you're walking around near the grass areas. Is there any sort of any sort of drainage of those areas? Because people are not going to be able to like have a picnic or something on that sort of ground. It's just impossible.
Right. Thank you. And to also add to the security question, Donovan Park is one of our parks that we lock at night, and so the unwanted behaviour that we witness is reduced in this scenario. With regards to the boggy areas you're talking about, that's what initially our Three Waters team were contemplating around the Three Water management.
Yeah.
So rather than spending ratepayers' money trying to drain and otherwise good part of stormwater management, how do we actually maximise that? And how do we make sure that we use that infrastructure as an asset to the city? So we're not looking at trying to put places where it's boggy. We're trying to make sure that we maximise the use of that space.
That's right. Thank you.
Interestingly, as a side note, Barry, those speed humps tend to deter a few people from perhaps using it as a speedway.
Yeah.
It's a suspension killer. Councillor Kett, Peter.
Thank you. You said during public consultation, 85% of the people knew that the Donovan Park farm land existed. Is that what you said?
When I was talking to people.
Right. So that's 85% of what number? How many people?
You got the stats. So we've probably... Yeah, so there was probably 50 odd at New World when we went to talk there. There was
80 at 40 at the library, 80 at the farmers market.
So 40 at the library, 80 at the farmers market. So we've been talking to over 100 people that we've talked to. And so, but as I described previously, we had the imagery in front of us. And so there's automatically an awareness of the scale of Donovan Park when they came to talk to us.
Yeah, so it's just over 100 people. It's not a great number to get the gauge of the population of Invercargill, about 54,000 people. While I do like Donovan Park itself, they go and feed the ducks, and there's a couple of hens here now too, and the geese, and you can see where the odd eel has slithered up, but it's great. You know, I remember when that the Donovan family gifted that in 1979, I think it was, and I've lived in that area for most of my life. A great area. It's a brilliant area, but to have a valuable farmland there, that's and there's a shortage of housing in our city, and they're not making any more land. and you said they had the AMP show. Well, the AMP show, they were there on Saturday a week ago, the 2nd of March. It was their royal show. Well, when I knew the AMP show, their normal show was a 2-day event. It was the exhibitors on the first day, the People's Day the second day, but when they had a royal show, they had 3 days. Now they had a royal show just Saturday a week ago, and it was only a 1-day event. So it seems a valuable land tied up there for one event a year, 1 day a year. And also you said there was one other event there. Well, that other event could have been held anywhere. It could have been held down at the park off other side of Tramway Road. What's the park down where the BMX track is? Down there, down that area?
Elizabeth Park.
Yeah, there's a lot of places around where it could have been held. Maybe even Rugby Park or the Surrey Park sporting field. So, yeah, I love the park area there, and the Waikiki Rugby Club area is great. But as I said earlier, it's very valuable land going to waste for say be 1 or 2 days a year. The equestrian, there's plenty of space out at the beach area for them to hold their equestrian events. They came in from Cooper's Corner, just beside the opposite service station between there and the old lawn home. There's now buildings going here. So the equestrian can go anywhere. They can go to Kennington. It's just a gathering of young people and their horses mainly. At the Invercargill Racecourse, there's miniature horses used that area there. There's also the kids' carts. So there's plenty of other spaces within our city boundary that can hold those events. Thank you.
Thanks, Peter. You might like to get along to one of those events. The eventing ones take place over quite a distance. The show this weekend, the weekend past, was a Friday night activity there, and the eventing through the Sunday. But take your point, it's certainly not the, if the town shuts on Friday afternoon and schools closed and everybody heads off to the AMP show like it used to be. I guess the challenge that lays before us is if there's going to be some sense of reorganisation, it's about relocating those events. But minds remain open. I think it's really worthwhile pointing out again that the subject of some residential change at Donovan Park was absolutely being broached, and consultation challenges that we face now, and we're all going to see this firsthand as we get out through the LTP, is difficult because you'll be in some places where people don't want to engage, and others when they will. Having done across the assorted master plans and LTPs at the moment, quite a bit of it recently, it's interesting with Donovan Park how when you start the conversation with them, or actually even Sandy Point as well, when you start the conversation with people, how passionately they speak about it, but actually how reasonable I've found some of the discussion to be as well. So, I think that's encouraging. Thanks, Chris and Cassie, for the update, which is really what it was intended for this afternoon. Thanks to those who've joined in on the live stream, and I'll close the workshop. Thank you.